Can you sleep with me tonight? The lonely rancher to the virgin giant mail-order bride he never ordered but couldn't let go. Can you sleep with me tonight? The words hung in the darkness between Wade Hollister, a lonely rancher who hadn't touched another human being in 3 years, and Colleen Brennan, the virgin giant mail-order bride, standing 6'3" in his doorway, her carpet bag clutched against her chest like armor. He never ordered her. The stagecoach driver had been drunk, delivered her to the wrong ranch in Wyoming territory. She was meant for Chester Grimes, the cruel cattle baron up the valley who'd buried 3 wives under mysterious circumstances. But when Wade saw the terror flash across Colleen's green eyes at the mention of Chester's name, when she whispered, "Please don't send me back," something inside his dead heart cracked open. So the lonely rancher lied. He told Chester she was already his wife, told the sheriff they'd married in secret, gave this virgin giant mail-order bride, this woman Boston had called a mistake, this woman no man had ever wanted, his bed while he slept in the barn. For 2 weeks they'd been strangers playing house. She transformed his tomb into a home. He taught her to ride, to shoot, to smile. Neither touched the other. Neither admitted the hunger growing between them. Until tonight, until Wade woke screaming from nightmares of his dead wife, his dead son, 3 years of guilt crushing his chest. Until Colleen found him shaking and soaked in sweat, and those desperate words escaped. But let's go back. Back to the moment everything changed. Back to the day the stagecoach rattled up Wade's dirt road, carrying a woman who would break every rule he'd built around his broken heart. It was spring in Wyoming, 1883, the kind of afternoon where the wind carried the smell of sage and distant rain. Wade stood on his porch watching the road like he did every evening, not expecting anything, just waiting for another day to die, so he could sleep and forget for a few hours that he was still breathing. Then he saw the dust cloud. A stagecoach coming fast, too fast, swaying like the driver couldn't see straight. Wade's hand instinctively went to the gun at his hip. Nobody came out here unless they wanted something or were running from something. The stagecoach lurched to a stop in his yard. The driver, a man named Cullen with whiskey breath and bloodshot eyes, practically fell off the bench. Mail-order bride for Hollister Ranch. Cullen shouted, slapping the side of the coach. "Sign here." Wade's stomach dropped. "I didn't order any." The door opened and she stepped down, tall. That was Wade's first thought. Taller than any woman he'd ever seen. She had to be at least 6'3", maybe more, with broad shoulders and long limbs that moved awkwardly, like she was apologizing for taking up space. Her hair was red gold, pulled back so tight it looked painful. Freckles scattered across her pale face. And her eyes, green as spring grass, were brimming with tears she was fighting hard not to shed. She wore a simple grey dress that was too short in the sleeves, too tight across the shoulders, like it was made for someone smaller. Everything about her screamed that she'd spent her whole life trying to fold herself into a world that wasn't built for her. "I'm Colleen Brennan," she said, her voice shaking but determined. "From Boston. You're Wade Hollister, aren't you?" "You're my husband now," Wade's brain stuttered. "Ma'am, I think there's been a mistake. Please." The word burst out of her like a dam breaking. "Please don't send me back. I spent everything I had on the train ticket, everything. If you send me back to Boston, I'll have nothing. I'll be—" her voice dropped to a whisper. "I'll be back where I started. And I can't go back there." Wade saw it then. The desperation. The same kind of desperation he'd felt standing over Martha's grave, wondering why God let him keep breathing when everything worth living for was buried 6 feet down. Cullen spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Well, you want her or not, Hollister? 'Cause if you don't, I got orders to take her up the valley to Chester Grimes. He ordered a bride, too. Maybe she's his." The name hit Wade like a fist to the gut. Chester Grimes, the man who'd had 4 wives. 3 were dead, 1 from a fall, 1 from pneumonia, 1 from complications. The 4th had disappeared one winter night, and nobody had seen her since. There were rumors, dark ones, The kind of rumors that made decent folks cross themselves and lock their doors when Chester rode past. Wade looked at Colleen again, really looked. She was trying so hard to make herself smaller, hunching her shoulders, ducking her head. Like if she could just shrink enough, maybe the world would stop punishing her for being different, and Wade understood. Because he'd been trying to disappear too. Just in a different way, no mistake, Wade heard himself say. The words came out before his brain could stop them. She's mine. She's supposed to be here. Colleen's head snapped up, her green eyes wide with shock and something else. Hope. Fragile, terrified hope. Cullen shrugged. Your funeral. Sign here. Wade signed the paper. His hand was steady even though his heart was hammering. What the hell was he doing? He didn't know this woman, didn't need a wife, didn't want the complications. But when Cullen drove away and Colleen stood there in his yard, clutching that carpet bag like it was the only thing keeping her from floating away, Wade knew he'd made the only choice he could live with. Thank you, Colleen whispered. You don't know what you've done. You've saved... Don't, Wade said quietly. Don't thank me yet. You might regret this tomorrow. But she shook her head. I won't, I promise you, whatever happens, I won't regret not going to Chester Grimes. The way she said Chester's name, like it tasted like poison, told Wade she knew exactly what kind of man Chester was. Come inside, Wade said. You must be tired. She followed him into the house, and Wade saw his home through her eyes, dark, silent, every surface covered in dust, dishes piled in the sink. The smell of neglect and grief hanging in the air like smoke. I'm sorry, Wade said, suddenly ashamed. I haven't. I don't keep house like I should. It's all right, Colleen said softly. Then hesitantly, would you mind if I cleaned a little? I'm not good at sitting still. You don't have to, please. She looked at him, and Wade saw the need in her eyes. The need to be useful, to earn her place. To prove she deserved the mercy he'd shown her. Let me help. So Wade showed her where things were. The well for water, the pantry with its sad collection of beans and salt pork and flour, the bedroom, the one he hadn't slept in since Martha died. You take the bed, Wade said. I'll sleep in the barn. Colleen's face flushed. That's not. You don't have to do that. This is your house. The barn's fine. I've been sleeping there for 3 years anyway. The words slipped out before Wade could stop them. Colleen's eyes widened. 3 years? Why? Wade looked away. Because I can't sleep in that bed anymore. Too many ghosts. He didn't explain. Couldn't. Not yet. That night, Wade lay in the hay in his barn, staring up at the rafters. Through the barn door, he could see the house. For the first time in 3 years, there was a lamp burning in the window. Just one small light. But it was something. It was proof that life was happening inside those walls again, and Wade didn't know whether to feel grateful or terrified. Wade woke to a smell he hadn't experienced in 3 years. Coffee, real coffee, not the bitter, burnt stuff he made in a dented pot. And something else. Bacon. Bread baking. For a confused moment he thought he was dreaming, or dead. Because the only time this house had smelled like home was when Martha was alive. He stumbled out of the barn, his heart pounding, half expecting to find the kitchen empty. Another cruel trick his grief-soaked brain was playing on him. But Colleen was there. She'd transformed the kitchen. Everything was clean. The counters scrubbed, the dishes washed and stacked, the windows open to let in the morning breeze. There was a tablecloth on the table, one Wade had forgotten he owned, and Colleen stood at the stove, her back to him, humming softly as she flipped bacon in the pan. She'd rolled up her sleeves. Her red-gold hair caught the morning sunlight, and for just a second Wade forgot to breathe. Good morning, Colleen said, turning. She smiled, but it was nervous, uncertain. I hope you don't mind. I couldn't sleep, so I thought I'd make breakfast. I found flour and salt pork in the pantry, and I thought... She stopped, biting her lip. Is this all right? I should have asked first. This is your house, and I just assumed. When's the last time you ate? Wade interrupted. Colleen blinked. Yesterday morning, on the train. Sit down. But I made this for you. Sit down, Colleen. Wade's voice was firm but gentle. You're not a servant here, and you're not earning your keep. You're a guest. And guests eat first. Colleen's eyes filled with tears. She quickly wiped them away, embarrassed. I'm sorry. No one's ever what? Treated me like I mattered. The words hung in the air like smoke. Wade felt something crack in his chest, that same feeling he'd had yesterday when she'd begged him not to send her back. They sat down together, ate in silence at first. The only sounds the scrape of forks on plates and the wind moving through the open window. Finally, Wade spoke. Why'd you do it? Why become a mail-order bride? Colleen's hand stilled on her fork. For a long moment she didn't answer. Wade thought maybe he'd pushed too hard, asked too much. Then she said quietly, In Boston, I worked as a seamstress. I made beautiful dresses for beautiful women. They'd come into the shop and they'd look at me like I was broken, wrong, like God had made a mistake when He made me. Her voice was steady, but Wade could hear the pain underneath. My own father called me the accident, said I was proof that sometimes the devil gets involved in God's work. Wade's jaw tightened. Your father said that? Every day of my life. Colleen looked up and her green eyes were fierce with old hurt. My mother would cry and pray over me, asking God to make me smaller. My brother Patrick would lock me in the cellar when his friends came over because he was ashamed to be seen with me. And the boys in Boston, she swallowed hard. They'd follow me in the street. Call me a giant, a freak. Say things I won't repeat. I'm sorry, Wade said, and he meant it, don't be. I'm not telling you this for pity. Colleen straightened her shoulders. I'm telling you, so you understand why I answered that advertisement. Why I spent every penny I had to come west. Because I thought maybe out here, where everything's bigger and wilder and stranger, maybe there'd be room for someone like me. Maybe I wouldn't have to spend every day apologizing for existing. Wade looked at her, really looked. At the proud set of her jaw, the strength in her hands, the way she held herself like she was ready to fight or run. Whatever the moment required. There's nothing wrong with you, he said. Colleen laughed. But it was bitter, broken. You don't have to be kind. Mr. Hollister, I know what I am. You're wrong. The intensity in Wade's voice made Colleen's head snap up. You're wrong about what you are. You're not broken. You're not a mistake. You're just you. And anybody who can't see that is blind. Colleen stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. Why are you saying this? Because it's true. Wade leaned forward. And because I need you to understand something. You're not a burden here. You're not earning your place. He stopped, searching for the right words. You're the first person who's walked into this house in 3 years and made it feel like something other than a tomb. Before Colleen could respond, they heard it. Horses, multiple riders coming up the road fast. Wade's whole body went tense. He stood, crossed to the window, and looked out. His blood ran cold. Chester Grimes, riding at the head of 6 men, all armed. And beside him, Sheriff Boone, looking tired and unhappy. Stay inside, Wade told Colleen, but Colleen had already seen. Her face had gone pale, her hands gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. That's him, isn't it? She whispered. Chester Grimes. Yes, he's come for me. Wade looked at her, saw the terror in her eyes, the resignation, like she'd always known this moment would come. Like she'd spent her whole life waiting for men to decide her fate, without asking what she wanted. Something fierce and protective rose up in Wade's chest, something he hadn't felt since the day Martha died. No, he said. He hasn't. Wade walked outside to meet them. Colleen followed, despite his order to stay inside. She stood on the porch, straight-backed and tall, trying not to shake. Chester Grimes was everything ugly about wealth and power. He was 58, heavy around the middle, with mean little eyes that looked at the world like everything in it belonged to him. He sat his horse like a king and looked at Colleen like she was livestock. Morning, Hollister, Chester said, his voice dripping with false courtesy. Seems there's been a little mix-up. That's my bride you got there, Wade kept his voice level. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play stupid. Chester spat tobacco juice into the dirt. Driver was drunk yesterday, brought her to the wrong ranch. I got the paperwork right here. He pulled out a folded document. One mail-order bride, ordered by me, paid for by me. That makes her mine. Sheriff Boone sighed. He was a decent man, tired, caught between the law and what was right. That true, miss? Were you ordered by Mr. Grimes here? Colleen opened her mouth, closed it. Wade could see her calculating, weighing her options, understanding that the law wasn't on her side. No, Wade said before she could speak. She's my wife. We married last night. The lie came out smooth as silk. Wade didn't even blink. Chester's eyes narrowed. That so? You got a marriage certificate? We had a private ceremony, Wade said, his voice steady. We'll register it in town next week. Convenient. Chester smiled, and it was like watching a snake bare its fangs. That true, girl? You married this man? All eyes turned to Colleen. Wade held his breath. She could expose the lie right now, could tell the truth, and let the law take her to Chester. It would be the safe choice, the legal choice, but Colleen looked at Chester, really looked at him, at the cruelty in his eyes, the way his gaze crawled over her body like she was property he was inspecting for damage, at the men behind him, all armed, all watching her with the same hungry, predatory interest, and then she looked at Wade, at the man who'd lied to save her, who'd given her his bed and slept in a barn, who'd told her she wasn't broken. Colleen stepped down from the porch, walked across the yard, and stood beside Wade, close enough that her arm brushed his. Yes, she said, her voice clear and steady. Wade is my husband. Chester's face darkened like a thundercloud. We'll see about that, Sheriff. I want an investigation. This man's committing fraud. Probably forced the girl too. I got rights here. I'll look into it, Boone said, sounding miserable. But Chester, if they say they're married, there's not much I can do without proof otherwise. I'll get proof. Chester pointed a thick finger at Wade. This isn't over, Hollister. Not by a long shot. They rode away, dust rising behind them like a warning. Wade and Colleen stood in the yard, not moving, barely breathing, until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely. Then Colleen turned to him. I'm sorry. I've dragged you into something terrible. Don't apologize, Wade said. I'm the one who lied. Then why did you? Wade looked at her, at this woman who'd been called a mistake her whole life, who'd crossed a continent hoping for something better, because when I looked in your eyes, I saw exactly what Chester would do to you, Wade said quietly. And I couldn't let that happen. Colleen's breath caught. You don't even know me. I know enough. They stood there in the fading dust, two strangers bound together by a lie that was starting to feel dangerously close to something real. The days that followed were strange, careful, like two wounded animals circling each other, trying to figure out if the other was safe. Wade taught Colleen to ride. She was terrified at first, afraid she'd break the horse, afraid her height would make her look ridiculous in the saddle. But Wade was patient. He showed her how to mount, how to hold the reins, how to move with the animal instead of against it. The first time she cantered across the open field, her red-gold hair coming loose from its pins, Wade felt something shift in his chest, something that had been frozen for 3 years, starting to thaw. Colleen transformed the house. She scrubbed and cleaned and mended. She found curtains in a trunk and washed them until they were white again. She planted wildflowers by the porch. She sang while she worked, old Irish songs her mother had taught her, sad and beautiful. Wade found himself listening, finding excuses to be near the house instead of out on the range. One afternoon, he came in for lunch and found Colleen standing on a chair, trying to reach a high shelf. Even standing on the chair, even at her height, she was stretching. What are you doing? Wade asked. Colleen jumped, nearly fell. Wade caught her, his hands on her waist, steadying her, and for a moment they were close enough that he could smell the soap she'd used that morning, could see the freckles scattered across her nose like constellations. Sorry, she said quickly, stepping down. I was trying to reach that box. I thought maybe there were more dishes up there. That's Martha's things, Wade said, his voice going flat. My wife's, my dead wife's. The words came out harsher than he meant them to. Colleen flinched like he'd struck her. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to intrude. I just thought. Wade turned away. It's fine, just leave that shelf alone. The rest of the day was awkward, tense. Wade hated himself for snapping at her. But every time he thought about that box, about Martha's dresses and the baby blanket she'd been making, his throat closed up and he couldn't breathe. That evening, Colleen made dinner in silence, set his plate down without looking at him, started to retreat to the bedroom. "Colleen," Wade said. She stopped but didn't turn around. "I'm sorry. For earlier, you didn't do anything wrong. It's your house," Colleen said quietly. "Your memories. I shouldn't have touched anything without asking." "It's not that." Wade stood crossed to her. "It's just hard talking about her, thinking about her. Some days I can barely remember what she looked like, and that terrifies me. And other days it's like she just died yesterday." Colleen turned to face him. "How long has it been?" 3 years, Wade's voice cracked. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. How did she die? Wade had never told anyone the full story, not even his neighbors. But something about Colleen, about the way she looked at him without pity, without judgment, made the words come. "Childbirth," he said. "The baby was breech. The doctor said he could try to save one of them, but not both. He asked me to choose." Wade's hands were shaking. "I chose Martha. I told him to save my wife. But she died anyway, bled out right there in our bed. And the baby, our son, he never took a breath. I held him and he was already cold." Tears were streaming down Colleen's face. "Oh, Wade, I failed them," Wade whispered. "I was supposed to protect them and I failed." "You didn't fail them." Colleen's voice was fierce. "You made an impossible choice in an impossible situation. That's not failure. That's just tragedy. It doesn't feel like tragedy. It feels like punishment." "For what?" "For being alive when they're not." Colleen reached out, hesitated, then took his hand. Her palm was warm against his. "You're allowed to live, Wade. You're allowed to keep breathing. That's not betrayal. That's survival." Wade looked at their joined hands. At this woman who'd been rejected her whole life, who'd been called a mistake, who'd crossed a continent alone, and who somehow understood his guilt better than anyone ever had. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not making me feel crazy." "You're not crazy," Colleen said softly. "You're just grieving, and grief doesn't follow rules." They stood there in the fading light, holding hands, two broken people finding unexpected comfort in each other's brokenness. The next week passed, in a blur of small moments. Wade teaching Colleen to shoot, her laugh when she actually hit the target, the way she'd leave him coffee in the barn every morning, the way he'd find wildflowers on the table that she'd picked just because they were pretty. They didn't talk about Chester, didn't talk about the lie they were living, didn't talk about what would happen when the truth came out, but they both felt it. The tension building, the awareness of each other growing sharper, more urgent. One evening, Wade was fixing a fence and looked up to see Colleen hanging laundry. The sun was behind her, turning her hair to gold. She was reaching up to pin a sheet, and she wasn't hunching, wasn't apologizing. She was just herself, tall and strong and beautiful. "You're staring," Colleen said without looking at him. Wade felt his face heat. "Sorry, don't be." She glanced back, and there was something new in her eyes, something warm and uncertain and terrified. "No one's ever looked at me the way you do. How's that? Like I'm not a mistake." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Like I'm something worth seeing." Wade crossed to her, stopped just close enough that he could feel the warmth of her body. "You are." "Worth seeing, I mean." Colleen's breathing had gone shallow. "Wade, I know it's too soon," Wade said quickly. "I know we barely know each other. I know I'm supposed to be grieving Martha. But when I'm with you, I feel like maybe I'm not dead inside anymore. Like maybe there's still something in me that can feel things. What do you feel?" Wade looked at her, at those green eyes that had held so much pain and were now holding so much hope. "Alive for the first time in 3 years. I feel alive." Colleen swayed toward him. Wade's hand came up, almost touching her cheek. Hoofbeats. They both jumped apart like guilty children. Wade turned to see a single rider coming up the road. Not Chester this time, someone else. As the rider got closer, Colleen's face went white. "No, oh God, no. Who is it?" "My brother," Colleen whispered. "Patrick." The man who dismounted was 30, well-dressed in a way that screamed East Coast money. He had Colleen's red hair, but none of her kindness. His face was sharp, mean, calculating. "Colleen," he said, looking her up and down with disgust. "Thank God I found you before you completely destroyed what's left of our family's reputation." "Patrick." Colleen's voice was small, defeated. "What are you doing here?" "Taking you home." Patrick looked at Wade like he was inspecting a piece of meat gone bad. "You must be the rancher she's been living in sin with." "She's my wife," Wade said carefully. Patrick laughed. "Wife? You married her without a priest? Without witnesses? Without our family's permission?" He turned back to Colleen. "Father's ill, mother's humiliated, and you're out here playing house with a stranger. We're leaving now." "No," Colleen said, but her voice wavered. "No." Patrick's voice went cold. "You don't get to say no, Colleen. You're an embarrassment, a disgrace. The kindest thing we've ever done was arrange that factory job for you back in Boston. You'll work there, live in the boarding house, and maybe, in 10 years, people will forget about this disaster." "She's not going anywhere," Wade said. Patrick's eyes narrowed. "And who are you to stop me? She's my sister, my family. You're just some desperate rancher who saw an opportunity." Wade's fist connected with Patrick's jaw before the man could finish. Patrick went down hard, blood streaming from his nose. "Get off my land," Wade said, his voice deadly calm. "And don't come back." Patrick scrambled to his feet, holding his nose. "You'll regret this. I'll bring the law. I'll bring Chester Grimes. I'll bring anyone who'll listen." He looked at Colleen with pure venom. "And you're dead to this family. You hear me? Dead." He rode off, cursing. Wade and Colleen stood in the settling dust. "I'm so sorry," Colleen said, her voice breaking. "I never meant for any of this." "Stop apologizing," Wade said. "You've done nothing wrong." But even as he said it, Wade felt the weight of what was coming. Chester and Patrick would join forces. They'd bring the law. They'd destroy everything. That night, Wade couldn't sleep. He lay in the barn, staring at the rafters, his mind spinning through worst-case scenarios. Sometime past midnight, the nightmares came. He was back in that room. Martha was screaming. The doctor was saying, "Choose. You have to choose." And Wade was holding his dead son, watching his wife's life bleed out onto white sheets, and he couldn't save either of them. Couldn't do anything but stand there and watch them die. "Wade!" He woke gasping, soaked in sweat. Colleen was there, kneeling beside the cot, her hands on his shoulders. "You're safe," she was saying. "You're here. You're safe." Wade was shaking. Couldn't stop shaking. His heart was slamming against his ribs, and he couldn't catch his breath. "I couldn't save them," he gasped. "I know," Colleen said softly. "I know." They sat there in the darkness, Colleen's hands steady on his shoulders, until Wade's breathing slowed, until the panic receded, until he could think again. And then, before he could stop himself, the words came out. "Can you sleep with me tonight?" Colleen's breath caught. "What? Not?" Wade's face flushed. "Not like that. I need to know someone's here, that I'm not alone. I know it's not proper. I know we're not really married. But please." "Yes," Colleen said. She lay down beside him on the narrow cot on top of the blanket. Fully clothed, Wade lay rigid, not touching her, terrified he'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. But then Colleen's hand found his in the darkness, her fingers intertwined with his. "I've been alone my whole life, too," she whispered. "I know what it costs." Wade's throat tightened. He squeezed her hand, and for the first time in 3 years, Wade Hollister fell asleep without nightmares. Because he wasn't alone anymore. When morning came, they were still holding hands, and that's when they heard the horses again. Multiple riders. "Coming fast." Wade sat up, his stomach sinking. Through the barn door he could see them. Chester Grimes, Patrick Brennan, Sheriff Boone, and a dozen armed men. This time, they weren't here to talk. Wade and Colleen walked out to meet them together. No more hiding, no more running. Chester sat his horse like a conqueror, Patrick beside him with his broken nose bandaged. Sheriff Boone looked sick about what he had to do. "Wade Hollister," Boone said, his voice heavy. "Chester's pressing charges, fraud, theft of property, and assault on Patrick Brennan here." Unless you can prove this marriage was legitimate from the start, I gotta take you in. He can't prove it, Chester said, grinning. Because it's a lie. That girl's mine by contract, and he stole her. Wade felt Colleen tense beside him, felt her preparing to sacrifice herself. To go with Chester to save Wade from jail, he couldn't let that happen. The marriage is real, Wade said. We consummated it. The lie hung in the air. Chester's face twisted with rage. Liar, Patrick spat. My sister's a virgin. She wouldn't. Actually, Colleen interrupted, her voice steady and clear. I'm not. Not anymore. Every man there stared at her. Patrick's face went purple. Chester looked like he'd been slapped. Colleen stepped forward, and for the first time since Wade had known her, she wasn't hunching. She stood to her full 6'3" height, and she was magnificent. Wade is my husband, she said. In every way that matters. I chose him. Not because I had to. Not because I was ordered to. But because he's the first man who ever looked at me and saw a person instead of a problem. Her voice grew stronger. So yes, Sheriff, we've consummated this marriage. It's legal. It's binding. And there's nothing Chester Grimes can do about it. Chester's hand went to his gun. You lying? 3 things happened at once. Wade drew faster, his gun aimed at Chester's heart. Sheriff Boone's deputies moved between them, and a new voice cut through the tension. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Chester. Everyone turned. A thin man in a suit stood at the edge of the property, holding a stack of papers. Behind him were 3 women, scared, haunted-looking women. Name's Thomas Garrett, the man said. I'm an attorney from Cheyenne, and these ladies have some things to say about their former husband, Chester Grimes. Chester's face went white. What is this? This is your 4th wife, Delia, who didn't die. She escaped. And these are the sisters of your 2nd and 3rd wives. The attorney held up the papers. They've given sworn testimony about what you did to those women. The beatings, the starvation, He paused. The murders. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Sheriff Boone's hand went to his own gun. Chester Grimes, you're under arrest. Chester tried to run. His men scattered, but Boone's deputies were faster. Within minutes, Chester was in handcuffs, screaming threats that nobody was listening to anymore. Patrick tried to grab Colleen's arm. You're still coming home. Father demands. Colleen's fist connected with her brother's already broken nose. He went down like a sack of flour. Tell Father I'm dead, Colleen said calmly. It'll be easier for everyone. Patrick scrambled onto his horse and rode off, blood streaming down his face. When the dust settled, Wade and Colleen stood alone in their yard. The sun was setting, painting the sky gold and pink and purple. Did we really just... Colleen started. Yeah, Wade said. We did. I lied, Colleen whispered. About us. About consummating the marriage. I lied under oath. Wade turned to face her. Do you want it to be a lie? Colleen's breath caught. What? Do you want this marriage to be real? Wade asked. Not because we have to, not because we're trapped, but because we choose it. Because somewhere in the last 3 weeks, I stopped pretending and started, he swallowed hard, started falling in love with you. Tears streamed down Colleen's face. How can you love me? How can I not? Wade cupped her face in his hands. You brought my dead house back to life. You taught me it's okay to keep breathing. You're brave and strong and beautiful, and you've been told you're too much for so long that you can't see you're exactly enough. I've never been enough for anyone. You're enough for me. Wade's thumb brushed away her tears. More than enough. You're everything, Colleen kissed him. Not tentatively, not apologetically, but with all the hunger and hope and love that had been building between them for 3 weeks. When they broke apart, both were crying. Marry me, Wade said. For real this time. With a preacher and witnesses and everything proper. Yes, Colleen laughed through her tears. Yes, yes, yes. 6 months later they stood in front of that same preacher. This time the wedding was real. Small but real. A few neighbors. Sheriff Boone, the attorney Garrett who'd saved them from Chester, and Delia, Chester's escaped 4th wife, who'd become Colleen's closest friend. Colleen wore a dress she'd made herself, cut to fit her tall frame, beautiful and unapologetic. Her red gold hair hung loose down her back. She wasn't hiding anymore. When she walked down the aisle, if you could call the space between the kitchen and the parlor an aisle, Wade's breath caught. Because he didn't see a woman who was too tall or too different. He saw his wife, his love, his future. You sure about this? Wade whispered when she reached him. Last chance to run. I've been running my whole life, Colleen said. I'm done. This is where I stay. They exchanged vows. Real ones this time. Promises made with full hearts and clear eyes. When the preacher said, "You may kiss your bride," Wade had to reach up slightly. And that detail, that small reversal of what was expected, made it perfect. That night, they stood on their porch together. The land stretched out before them, hard and beautiful and theirs. The house behind them was full of light and life and love. Did you ever think, Colleen said, that day I arrived at the wrong ranch, that we'd end up here? No, Wade admitted. I thought I'd spend the rest of my life alone, punishing myself for failing Martha and our son. You didn't fail them, Colleen said gently. You loved them. You tried to save them. That's all anyone can do. I know that now. Wade pulled her close. You taught me that. You taught me it's okay to live again, to love again, to let light back into the dark places, Colleen smiled. You taught me I'm not too much, that I deserve to take up space, that being different isn't the same as being wrong. They stood together as the stars came out, two people who'd been broken, finding wholeness in each other. Two people who'd been alone, discovering they never had to be alone again. Can you sleep with me tonight? Wade asked, echoing that desperate question from months ago. But this time, Colleen laughed. Every night, for the rest of our lives, they walked inside together. The house was warm, full of light, full of love. And for the first time in 3 years, Wade Hollister was home, not because of the building or the land, but because of the woman beside him. The woman who'd arrived at the wrong ranch and become exactly the right person. The virgin giant mail-order bride he never ordered but could never let go had become the wife he chose, the partner he needed, the love he never expected to find again, and in a world that had told them both they were too broken, too different, too much. They'd found each other and built something beautiful. Sometimes the wrong turn leads you exactly where you need to be. Sometimes the mistake becomes the miracle, and sometimes love finds you in the most unexpected places, with the most unexpected person, at the most unexpected time. All you have to do is be brave enough to let it in. Now, we want to hear from you. Have you ever been told you were too much of something? Too tall, too quiet, too loud, too sensitive, too ambitious? How did you overcome it? And have you ever had a wrong turn in life that ended up being exactly what you needed? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might encourage someone else who's struggling to believe they're enough just as they are. And tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Are you in America like Wade and Colleen? Or are you connecting with this story from across the ocean? We love knowing our community spans the globe. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next emotional journey. We have more powerful stories of love, redemption, and second chances coming your way. Until next time, remember, you are not too much. You are not a mistake. You are exactly enough. And your story, your real story, is still being written.